Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm Bolton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man. Now then, Kamala, the cackling cop.
Yeah, we're going to be covering the debate because obviously it just happened yesterday, so it's fresh in everyone's minds. And also, there are a lot of issues that were brought up during the debate that require further examination because one of the things about the debate is that a lot of the times before the debaters could actually get their full point across, the moderators will try and cut them off. And this happened a lot, especially to Trump during last night, because it was basically a 3-on-1. And there were even questions where I thought to myself, this is just the moderators basically teeing up an attack for Kamala Harris against Trump. It was
Yeah,
just so
or
disgusting to
just
watch.
straight up attacking him themselves a lot of the time. That was something I noticed too. Was like when he tried to justify January 6th or tried to justify his obvious lawfare. Um, they would either just dismiss it outright or they would try to zero back in on the but we are the correct ones and we are the valid ones and we are the establishment, so it's obviously your fault. And
Yeah, I believe he tried to bring up the assassination attempt against him, and they tried cutting him off then too,
I think they literally just cut him off because that was the only time in that entire debate that it was mentioned. And
which is
something
ridiculous. Like, it's a major
something
event.
we were talking about something we were talking about behind stream before we bothered to hit the live button. I honestly think he did well, but there are a lot of ways in which I feel like he was trying to act restrained to be quote unquote civil, and I think it backfired on him because a lot of the things people like about Trump is that he is anathema to the establishment, is that he is a populist, is that he is a showboater and the guy who can read the room, and the kind of guy who can negotiate with people in the third world or Russia. And
Yeah,
especially with him apparently using Tulsi Gabbard as a debate prep partner, I was fully expecting a repeat of the famous your own record no jitsu maneuver that Tulsi pulled on Kamala the last time that dropped her support from 15% to just over 3%, reducing it by roughly a factor of 5. But yeah, he restrained himself a lot, and he didn't hammer her as much on her record as a politician, full stop. He tried to focus in, I think, too much and to his detriment on her record as a vice president. And he didn't even bring up the candidate switcheroo that nobody voted for at the last second until like the very, very end, or that Kamala and Joe have both had 3.5 years, almost their entire term, to do everything they want to do, and none of this has gotten done. Or the how useless and unimportant Kamala is as a person because she peaked at 15% in 2020 and it got radically reduced by one bad debate performance. So
well,
like there
I've
there are a
heard.
lot of ways in which I think if Trump was more Trumpy in that debate, he could have sank the whole campaign right then and there. And it does bother me that uh, vice presidential debate notwithstanding, this I think is the only actual debate they're going to have, and I wish he had come out swinging more in the event that this is the last debate they're going to have, because I know he's pushing for more debates. But I think
I,
Kamala and the establishment realize that the more you see of her, the less you will like her, and the more likely it is that he is going to pull out the Tulsi Gabbard inherited sword and just yeet her entirely.
well, I do believe that her campaign has, after this one, agreed to one more debate because I don't believe she performed as bad as people were expecting her to. But one of the explanations that I've heard about why Trump may have been as reserved is because I believe he didn't want people to see him as being a bully because for some reason, you know, people don't um a, like the idea of a president or a politician who is going to be around, bullying people. Which one I firmly disagree with. It's not good being bullied, but when the bully is on your side, stopping you from getting your ass kicked, then that guy is your best freaking friend
Yeah,
because
if you
that's
if you
exactly what America needs. Hold on. Like that's exactly what America needs on the world stage. Someone who is going to pig-headedly, bulldoggishly stand up for our interests and not just sell us out for the sake of the so-called global community of nations, which is absolute bullcrap. Because, like Trump mentioned with NATO, he mentioned this while on the debate stage. NATO was basically just leeching off of America. America was paying far more than it should have, and the other nations weren't paying nearly what they should have been. And Trump said in there, "Hey, this is supposed to be an alliance. If you're not paying your fair share for this alliance, we're not going to protect you."
yeah,
And so
we'll
they
take
started
our
kicking in
ball and
more.
go home because we seem to be the ones footing the bill here for no other reason than because we can. Um, and also something that did get mentioned at least a little bit last night that I wish again had been more focused on the establishment and the establishment and the bureaucracy of the Western world hand wring and bullshit about how being a strong man is bad. But the thing of that is, in pretty much every other relevant area of the world, be it the Middle East, be it China and Asia, be it um, parts of Africa, be it Russia, whatever, like in almost every other area of the world, most of the time people are still operating with an ethos that's informed by like old school courtly politics of like the mirrors of princes, like Balthasar Castiglione's Book of the Courtier and Machiavelli's The Prince. And in those veins, you judge the worth of a nation by the like qualitative virtues of their leader, and one of those qualitative virtues that a politician must have is the ability to stand on principle and be strong enough to say, if you fuck with me, I will screw you over so hard that you will not see straight the next morning.
Yeah, and Trump has that, and like both Biden and Kamala Harris don't. They will bend over backwards to be accommodating to other countries, even if it costs the American people. Like you can see that with how much they're shelling out for Ukraine, how much they're shelling it for the Israel-Palestine conflict, and people are getting screwed over. You can see that by them not closing the border, no matter how many people, both in red states and blue states, call for them to do so, because they don't
And
care.
again,
Outside of getting people to vote for them, they do not give a damn what the people think.
it's like 99.9% just moral hand wringing of we don't think we should operate by that old school courtly etiquette, honor based, qualitative notion of, the just king or the true king ethos anymore. And it's like, okay, but the Western world, and in particular the Anglosphere, are the only ones still doing it. Like, we're the only ones not doing things in the way that you know, you judge a country by the honor and qualitative virtues of the leader thing. That's what literally everyone else does. It's what Putin does, even though he's a KGB bastard, and obviously that's no bueno. It's what all of the sultans and fixtures in the Islamic world do. It's what China does and is doing. Like, it's what Japan does. I mean, the honor of the honor fixation and the like propriety fixation of Japan is a storied one, for God's sake. And yet we are the only ones operating by this like post-war consensus where we just put away the courtly etiquette rules and the honor system anymore because that's too backwards and brazen and blunt and uncouth. Therefore, we have to reach for something higher. And it's like, one, that something higher of yours isn't all that much higher because there's actual like moral reasoning that went into the courtly consensus back in the day. And two, it all it does is handcuff our hands behind our back, even though we have the most resources, the most cultural capital, the most like moral justification to be the world hegemon if there needs to be one. And I'm speaking for the entire Anglosphere on that point. The Anglosphere in particular, and Europe more generally, is the best case of who we can have to be the world hegemon. Because if it's not Europe and the Anglosphere, it will be Russia or China or the Middle East or, God forbid, Africa when they finally get their shit together. And we will all be living in a totalitarian hellscape that would make Dante and Orwell both blush simultaneously. So we need to actually use the resources and the clout and the actual legitimate justification we have to be the world hegemon, because we are not a perfect system, but we are the best option the world has. And any other alternative would lead us straight back into third world level barbarism in the space of about a century if we're not careful.
Well, that's the thing. Look, it seems that the elites, not just in America and the Democrats, but also around the world, seem to have like an active disdain for their own populace, which is one of the most disturbing things you can have in politics because they'll not just lead straight into authoritarianism, they're going to put the boot on your neck, but also, they, when people actually do try to use democracy and, create these grassroots movements, create these, alternative parties so that the Republican people can try and get enacted and try and turn around a lot of these policies that have been failing, they will actively use their power and authority to crush their budding opposition. And so I heard a phrase the other day that says, it doesn't matter who has the law, it matters who has the authority.
Uh, that is possibly the most horrifying phrasing possible. And I know this is a standard trick of mine to point out that populism and democracy are literally the same concept in two different languages, because the word democracy comes from the Greek demos, which, when you translate into Latin, is populus. So to say that any meaningful democracy can even be long-term anti-populist is a contradiction in terms and modes of thought so blatant that I can't believe we actually let them do it. And yet we live in a alleged democracy, mind you, where populism is synonymous with the devil, is synonymous with fascism, is synonymous with authoritarianism. Meanwhile, the phrase "our democracy," when you actually pad it out, means the democracy of the valid people, and democracy of the valid people and only the valid people is a more protracted way of saying an aristocracy. And aristocracies are by their very nature elitist. All of this gets tidied up when you know those two etymological roots. When you know that populism and democracy are the same thing, and democracy of the valid people is just a more flowery way of saying an aristocracy, and therefore an elitist one. When you
The
clean
problem
those
is,
two things up, it becomes very obvious what is happening. They are they are acting as an aristocracy and demonizing populism and the substance of democracy by using the term democracy as a shield for their aristocratic elitist leanings. Obviously.
yeah, and the thing is, we have allowed our politicians to become the new aristocracy. We have allowed them to accrue so much power, so much money, and so much protection that no matter how bad they screw up, and we've have the numbers for how bad the devil has been to this country. Like, go outside to the grocery store or take a look at what's happening in cities where communities are being broken up because they're being flooded by illegal migrants, and you can see the damage that's been done. And even when it's this clear, they are so insulated from the actual, goings on of the country that they just don't care. Because people like that will only begin to care when it actually starts affecting them, and they've successfully insulated themselves from the consequences of the policies that they're enacting. When the
A-
founding fathers, first came together for Congress, there were people that lived in their communities and even had like regular everyday jobs. They weren't separate from the people that they were trying to represent.
and moreover, what always happens when an aristocracy, for that is, as I've just explained, functionally what we are dealing with here, what always happens when an aristocracy allows itself to become insulated and out of touch, they go ideologically bonkers and basically care more about the fripperies and like excesses of the aristocratic order by ideological reasoning. For this, read neo-Hegelianism generally and all of the post-Frankfurt School bullshit in particular, and they therefore inflict those high-minded moral ideas that are detached from reality onto everyone the fuck else, and they actually view themselves as the better people for having done so. All the while, all of the people on the ground are saying to them, this ideology of yours is bullshit and you need to knock it the fuck off because it ruins everything it touches. That explains literally every side of this issue. First, they conflated our democracy with aristocracy. Second, they demonized actual democracy and or populism. And third, they insulated themselves and thereby became ideologically out of touch with an ideology that ruins everything it touches, just like the French Revolution aristocrats did. And I don't really want to get to the point where we have to break out the guillotine, but it's getting stark, you must admit.
And one of the most stark examples of this, and I know it's a separate individual, but this is Gavin Newsom, but Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris basically share the same brain cell, singular. But yeah, one of the most stark examples is when the president of China, Xi Jinping, came to California, and for years there had been, homeless people, filth, drugs, on the streets of San Francisco, and people have been begging the city and the state to do something about it, and they were just being ignored. But when, the president of China, a dictator who is outright hostile to the United States, comes over to visit California, Gavin Newsom, has the street looking spotless and immaculate. And then when he's questioned about it by the press and by the people, it says he basically says, "Well, yes, we did it for him because he's important." He's clearly stating that the people of California he does not view
Yeah,
as important.
it's literally saying we as the aristocracy have to pretty up our vassals because another aristocrat that we actually care about is coming over. Meanwhile, the peasants are like, is there some way we could maintain this standard all the time? And they are told, how dare you insinuate that we should owe you a damn thing, peasants? Go back to supporting the lifestyle to which we have become accustomed, which we will not share with you because fuck you, that's why.
Now, I gotta say, I want to state it clearly right here. I do not support the French Revolution. I'm just beginning to understand.
Yeah, the noblesse oblige has well and truly been violated all to hell, and one of the reasons they dislike Trump is because he actually knows how to operate within the noblesse oblige type system. And yet, they are surprised that people are getting more and more and more quote unquote radicalized against the nobles, against the elites, and against the
They always
anti
talk,
populist elitist screed.
they always talk about Trump, having an ego and wanting to have his ego stroked. But the thing is, he doesn't care about having his ego stroked by, other politicians or celebrities. He wants the love of the people, which is what a politician should want. Every politician should want the people of their state or of their country to absolutely love them,
And
because
and it
that is how you hold them accountable.
that is also the fulfillment of the idea of noblesse oblige, and it is also ever since like medieval romance literature been known to be the attitude of the true and rightful king. Now, obviously, I don't mean literally make Trump a king, but the kind of politician you want is the kind of politician that in Stephen King's mythos would have the shining, i.e., the virtues of the true and rightful king who can stand and be true in the face of adversity and darkness. And Trump is far more an exemplar of that kind of shine than is literally any other politician. currently operating, pretty much, except for maybe like Javier Milei and the dude from El Salvador, because they are also based. And I think even Trump last night gave credit to Viktor Orban. So like there are other true kings in the offing, metaphorically speaking, but they are rare and few and far between. And maybe all of the true kings should get together and make a just and rightful rule of the people, because that would be nice if the true king sat on the throne instead of dozens upon dozens upon dozens of stewards
All right,
trying to deny the return of said kings.
I'm gonna hit play because you were 20 minutes in and we haven't even started the video.
Oh boy. Yep.
I'm sad to say I watched the full Trump Kamala Harris debate this morning on my way into work, and it was boring. I have to be completely honest, guys. I know that people want to hear about how it's this huge triumph for Trump, how there was so many incredible takedown moments, how the energy was back, and I think there's a lot of truth to parts of that, because Trump certainly was a lot more tenacious. He was much more on attack than he was at the Joe Biden debate. But I think...
See, you said that you would disagree with that he wasn't on the attack enough. I think you said.
Yeah, I do think that if he had come out swinging, especially because at the time, at least, it looked like this was going to be the only debate he was going to get with her. Obviously, we still have the Tim Walz, JD Vance debate, and go full force, JD Vance. But at the time, it seemed like this was going to be Trump's only shot to actually swing at her instead of Joe, and I would have basically copied Tulsi Gabbard's homework and put Trumpian sprinkles on it, is what I would have done. But that's just my opinion. I think if he had been more like himself and a little bit less trying to act statesmanly and refined for the people in the middle, he ironically would have gotten more people in the middle on board, I think.
Yeah, one of the issues that I feel like Trump should have, hit Kamala on is the fact that the Biden-Harris administration has gone out of their way to make parents the enemy after, all the parents were, protesting and raising their ruckus at the school board meetings with the DOJ, um, saying that parents are a threat, apparently.
Yeah, how dare you claim any sort of duty of care over your own children? Now, mind you, I also don't think that children should be viewed as necessarily the property of the parents, but I would rather they be the property of the parents than the property of the teachers, the establishment, and academia, which seems to be their gambit in this particular game. Frankly, children shouldn't be property at all. They should be viewed as developing individuals. But
I think property is just a bad phrasing. I think a better word would be like they are under the protection of their parents first and foremost.
And that's just maybe, but there are plenty of people who do go hardline, my child is my property, and that's, I think, a very unhealthy attitude. But it certainly beats the pants off of your teachers and your government and your academic superiors have more of a stake in this person becoming a better person than you do, person who gave them life. That, as stupid and occasionally sinister as the children as property motif gets, it's still a lot better for the parents to be involved in that than it is for literally all of the bureaucrats to be involved in that. I know it takes a village to raise a good child, and it definitely does, but at the moment, the village is being run by maniacs, and the maniacs are burning things down just for the glory of watching it burn most of the time.
Yes, and labeling parents as a threat is especially disgusting when you consider that we have seen an increase of teachers, especially female teachers, having inappropriate relations with children, and
Yeah,
parents as
the
a threat when these children are being abused in the schools that you're supposedly trying to defend from the ire of these parents is absolutely egregious and disgusting.
and it literally just is the political inversion of the attitude during the Satanic Panic, where parents would take their child to hypnotherapists to have quote unquote memory recall on them. Now, we know more now about how memory works, and therefore we know that most of the memory recall that was done to those kids was actually a memory implantation. But the same thing is happening with the issue of trans kids, which frankly shouldn't even be a thing, because the trans issue should be a decision made by people who are full grown adults and people who have actually been through puberty and for whom puberty wasn't a strong enough affiliator between their sex and their gender for them to cut down on dysphoria. And you
Right.
definitely
And
should let kids go through puberty, because one of the things puberty does psychologically is it increases your affiliation between your sex and your gender, if you have any confusion about it. Now, it doesn't always work, which is why there are still trans adults, but you need to let nature have its best shot at increasing that affiliation organically instead of medicalizing and forestalling it.
all right, there is more I want to say, but I also want to get through the video.
Yeah, banana. E? I'm assuming he was called away for personal reasons. We discussed this and he said it might happen, so I'm assuming that's what's happening. And he'll be back when he's finished the thing he told me he was going to be involved in, which I will not share because private things should remain private unless they're relevant. Oh, yeah. I believe we have. I believe we may have lost E. I assume he will make an effort to come back as and when he's finished. In the interim, though, I kind of want to expand on that parallel I just made between the Satanic Panic parents having memory recall done on their children as a parallel to the trans puberty blocking issue in modern day kids. And honestly, I can't see any way in which they're not parallel, with the exception of this time it has the backing of institutions, corporations, and academia, whereas before it was mostly on the semi-religious fringes, and thus didn't have quite so much um, think of the children clout to it, whereas obviously now, if you come out against trans kids, you will be seen as a fascist strawman, which is bullshit.
Sorry about that. It was my connection that that crapped out. I'm gonna start doing these in my living room with a wired connection, just so that kind of thing doesn't happen.
Okay. I assumed you were dealing with the personal stuff that you mentioned to me earlier, but okay.
No, it was just my internet connection, but I'll try and get the video back.
Mm-hmm. Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. We will resume your regularly scheduled Duality
Full
Man
Trump
shortly.
Kamala Harris debate. veiled insults at one another while all of the rest of your group goes whoa behind you, that this underwhelmed.
Do you think that we've just reached the stage of civilizational grief where we've hit acceptance, and lots of other people that still care about this are in the bargaining stage, and so they think that recycling constant WWE style SmackDowns is actually going to move politics forwards, and they think that if Trump just squeaks out another really convincing policy proposal or another brutal insult leveled at Harris, then it will change all the minds of the single women voting purely on the basis that they've been convinced the other side is weird. Like, because at this point, I think the sides are so entrenched, these debates basically do nothing.
Well, that's one of my...
Again, I would fundamentally, almost mirror image, disagree here. I think that the problem of last night's debate was that it wasn't enough of a straight-out WWE fight in verbal form, so to speak. I think that it actually would have been more meaningful if Trump had borrowed the sword lent to him by Tulsi Gabbard and gone straight up slay the dragon on Kamala. And I think the best option for him in the second debate, if there is going to be one, is to try to do as Trumpian as possible a redux of Tulsi Gabbard's famous calling out of Kamala in 2020, because reducing your opponent's support by a factor of 5 is not a shabby level of victory, Mr. Trump. And there's a lot more actually that you can pull from than Tulsi could have back in 2020. So not to mention, Trump's verbal style is already very punchy and very iconoclastic. So channeling that kind of Tulsi Gabbard energy through a Trumpian filter would, I think, maybe even be more effective than Tulsi's factor of 5 reduction of Kamala. So in my opinion, yes, you should be as overt as you possibly can, and enough with all of the civility and decorum mongering already, because the normative institutional civility and decorum mongering is what's getting in the way of populism dethroning elitism and the establishment. And I think the correct answer is to be as irreverent in the face of the authority of the establishment or normative institutions as possible. Because every time you do the literal exact opposite of what the establishment wants you to do, that's when people actually are on your side. And anytime you try to play the civility and decorum mongering shit, you will ultimately lose people.
There is one thing that I would say. I would say try and play the statesman when you're answering questions, like, say, from the moderators. But when Kamala responds and she basically reveals a weak point, an opening that you can hit her on, hit her and hit her hard on that point. Drill it home like fucking Gurren Lagann, and do not let up until you successfully drilled it, not just into Kamala, but into the minds of the American people. There were several moments where Kamala would say something, and then I would say this right here. This is the opportunity. Hit her hard, Donald. And he didn't hit her as hard as I thought he should.
Yeah, he kind of came in with a white glove and tried to soft pedal it a little bit. Also, something to keep in mind, there were a lot of times where the moderators themselves were just straight up oppositional to him and on Kamala's side. And I think calling that stuff out as overtly as possible would have also been beneficial to him.
Yeah, they actually called out Trump in the debate whenever he was wrong about something. But when Kamala repeated the, very fine people on both sides,
oh God, the Charlottesville thing,
to hell and back, like, they didn't say a damn thing whenever she pulled out that old lie.
Yeah, no, that's obvious misinformation. No, that's obvious disinformation. Disregard that. It's been debunked. None of that. But every time Trump referenced the lawfare thing, or the institutional persecution thing, or the making the largest possible hay out of a minor document mistake thing, it was always, we are the establishment, we are the official ones, and therefore we will disregard all of what you have just said. Tut, tut. I'm sorry. Sometimes in my head, these people sound literally like Victorian aristocrats without all of the good qualities of Victorian aristocrats.
Who, the Lotus Eaters?
No, no, the establishment in general, or the mainstream media in particular, is when they try that "we are the establishment, therefore we are the declarers of what is true" thing. It always comes off as "we are the ones who will decide what is done here," and I can't not mock and meme that to hell with the aristocratic bullshit that it is.
I would say that they're not even Victorian aristocrats. They're more like Game of Thrones aristocrats.
Well,
Specifically,
and that's
hold on.
why I
Specifically, I would say they're more like Cersei from Game of Thrones, who wants to be a schemer, manipulator, and a power player, but not as nearly as smart as she thinks she is.
honestly, I think comparing them to Cersei is giving them a little bit too much credit. I think they're more akin to Joffrey most of the time, especially lately, because the more they feel like they're in a corner and their lead is slipping away, the more overtly they hyper radicalize and the more they overstretch. Which, ironically, the overstretching that they do in the face of losing their precious officialdom, authority, decorum, etc., is exactly what will make their civility, authority, and decorum fade faster and faster by the minute. So I guess we should, take Nelson's advice, or yeah, and not interrupt our enemies when they're making a mistake, except to mock them,
Yeah.
because mocking them is fun and it's moralizing. So yay.
Yeah, I was going to say that they're not as evil as Joffrey is, but then I remembered that they're actively hiding the Epstein clients, and yeah, so I can't really say that anymore.
And the trans kid issue, and the "how dare you not abide by the trans kid" issue, and the list she goes
And all
on.
the criminal migrants that they're letting in. Which, by the way, if you're coming in illegally, that makes them all criminals. Everyone's coming in illegally.
Now, I'm willing to be somewhat sympathetic to people who um, get here and then don't ever do a damn thing wrong other than that, because that's just that's at least making a good faith effort. But yeah,
Uh,
once they've shown that that is not an isolated incident, then yeet them from the country in as overt a fashion as you like.
See, I used to have sympathy. That's all gone now. They ruined it. It's like we gave you, like, I'm willing to give this to you. You destroyed it. Now you don't get any more.
Well, but I I'm willing to at least still extend it somewhat, because the majority of immigrants, legal or illegal, just want to get on with their lives and do the best they can.
Is that true? I would definitely say that for the legal ones, but for all the illegal ones, they seem to apparently just be rushing the border because they know that the Biden administration will give them free shit. Like when the Trump administration was in charge, a lot of them didn't bother coming because they knew they weren't going to get shit and just got turned around the border. And they've said that themselves. Like there was an interview with a person who was coming across the border legally, and the reason why he said he was coming was, well, Biden's in charge now.
Yeah, but I'm skeptical and curious as to what percentage of even the illegals that is. I think that's definitely true. That's far more true of the migrant situation over in Britain right now with the Muslim invaders. I'm not certain how true it is with the majority of people that are just people. It's definitely true of all the drug dealers and the people in hock to the cartels, and fuck those people with every conceivable instrument you have at your disposal. But the average, just Mexican cleaning lady, the Consuela, so to speak, if all she does wrong is that one thing, and she goes along being as good faith as possible thereafter, I don't fucking care. Once
I
she's
guess on
done
that,
something
people
else
will have to
wrong,
disagree, I guess.
by all means, just screw her. But I'm willing to at least give it okay, you did this one thing, and if that is an isolated incident, then I don't care. If you do something else, then there is the door, which you shall not be kicked through.
Well, here's the thing. I would say that if you're able to come legally, then you should be allowed to, go through the process and come legally. If you're gonna come illegally, even if all you want is a better life, I'm sorry, but we can't have that. Like, I would say hard line at all because it's just inviting trouble. And not only that, but being in America is not something that you're just allowed to do. Like, it's not something that you have a right to do just because you want to come.
That's true. And then again, like I said, quite a lot of the illegals they are letting in for no explicable reason are actually kind of based because they thought letting them all in would be an instant I win button for every issue. But what they didn't take into account is a lot of the people from down that way are very conservative Catholics. So, oops, folks. You played yourself on that one.
And as reason as base as that they are, like it's not just about the people who commit crimes. Like from a systematic point, like they're causing a lot of strain on the system because we have a lot of people here, you know, millions of people who are now taking out of the system, putting an extra strain on it that haven't paid into it, and it's just not designed to handle it. I've seen like videos of black people, like in communities like in Baltimore, in New York, in Chicago, who are complaining to their city council because now there are city and community services that they need that they would like to have access to, but they can't because it's all being spent to assist the illegal migrants that just came in.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think Britain definitely has it worse than we do on that front, and my sympathies to those across the pond. But we kind of got off under the weeds there. We probably should continue with the video.
Concerns with the whole thing, which is that the debate was essentially a reaffirmation of all of the policies that we already know that Trump is going to do, and maybe a hint at the policies that Kamala Harris has been not very forthcoming in explaining to people. She was going on about how there was going to be some kind of accommodation economy, some kind of striving economy, basically an economy that works for the middle class. And Donald Trump was talking about how his economy wasn't just going to work for the middle class, it was going to work for everybody with his tax cuts and his tariffs that were going to be put onto different products coming from overseas, especially in places like China. But we'll get into all of that as we get into the rest of the segment. First, for those on the website, that you'll already have heard of this, but for those watching on YouTube, we actually have, after the immense and fantastic success of the first issue of Islander, a second issue available on the website right now. It features articles from very many great, fantastic...
I'm just gonna...
Yeah, we probably should just skip the ad. No shade whatsoever to the folks over at Podcast Duality. By all means, create whatever you can, but we are under time constraints, so skipping the ad.
Which is the most important thing in politics.
As most people do. Donald Trump, despite obviously being getting along in his age right now, seemed energetic, he seemed a bit tenacious, he was on the attack, again, unlike when he was against Biden, because he knew that all he needed to do with Biden was stand there and watch as Biden sank himself. So he was energetic, interrupting, bit more combative, which was all very good. Kamala Harris has the voice, mannerisms, and air of a naggy HR woman. And I think that Americans should purely vote against her and vote for Donald Trump just on the basis that, do you want the nagging HR woman to run your country and be delivering speeches for the next 4 years?
So I think that
this was another thing I wish he had cued on. I didn't see him once, mention all of the ways in which she's terrible. You could have gotten away with an awful lot just by mentioning just once Kamala the cackling cop. Just refer to her cackling or refer to her hyper like hyper authoritarian criminal prosecutorial thing, and you would have had everyone eating out of your hand in like 5 seconds flat. And yes, she does have the manner of the middle manager at any given corporation in today's day and age. And that would have been a nice thing to allude to as well, especially with J.D. Vance's our society is being run by a bunch of childish HR cat ladies line, which honestly, the one criticism that I genuinely will stick to Trump on this, and with no provisos, is he did kind of almost throw J.D. Vance under the bus on the abortion issue. And I would have, honestly, I would have just come out and said, yes, I believe in the exceptions. I would veto anything that doesn't include those exceptions, because we all know that's your stance anyway, and most of the reasonable people on your side aren't going to be that turned off by that. And two, it would have been a good excuse to Chad yes JD Vance, because what we have instead now is a appearance that for all the world looks like you're kind of distancing yourself from JD Vance and trying to throw him under the bus, even though most of the things he said have been objectively correct and rhetorically strong. So you probably shouldn't do that. You should Chad yes your boy on that front.
Yeah. And Kamala is basically the living embodiment of those, annoying middle-aged wine ant Karens who are so overly opinionated about everything and also simultaneously wrong about all of their opinions.
This was also something I found stunning during the debate was, despite the alleged age issue, she's the one who came off as low energy and senile in some of those positions. Whereas I mean, this isn't surprising because the man was on the ball after he literally got shot at. So I'm not surprised that he's still ready and raring to go on multiple levels. But it is worth noting that she barely survived a debate. He was, Breakfast Club fisting the air after being shot at.
Yeah. I mean, he tried to bring up the assassination. I mean, the moderators cut him off. The moderators were disgustingly unfair to Donald Trump. And as I mentioned before, I believe we started, there were several questions which were basically just teeing the ball up for Kamala Harris to attack Trump. It was so nakedly partisan that I could barely watch it.
And that doesn't even include all the times where they just straight up seemed to have attacked him. Like, it wasn't even teeing up for her. It was just them straight up saying, we are the arbiters of what is the establishment and what is legitimate, and we have found you wanting, basically.
Yeah, not only that, but they purposely misled with the whole January 6th question when they asked it. They talked about Trump, telling his supporters to go down to the Capitol, but they purposely cut out, him saying that it's peacefully and patriotically, make your voices heard, and whenever he brought up the fact that he had offered more troops for security to Pelosi and Pelosi turned it down, they completely ignored that and said, like, well, we're not talking about Nancy Pelosi, we're talking about you. It's like, well, yeah, but my point regarding
Yeah,
security
she
is
was
that
responsible,
I
though.
offered it. Yeah, like you would have gone him about what happened. Well, he offered more security. Like if they had listened to Donald Trump, like there would have been more security, and that wouldn't have happened. And also, just because people are your supporters doesn't mean make you responsible for everything that they do. Like it's ridiculous to think that just because like it it has nothing about January 6th. People act like it's some like massive tragedy against the nation and like whoa, what a shameful day. Like it was a protest that devolved into a riot. Like
Yeah, people try to conflate it with something like 9/11, and it's just, and honestly, again, this is another point at which I would have just gone Chad yes. If I were him, I would have just said January 6th was, and always has been a non-issue, and you have been politically persecuting these people. And I'm not going to back down from it. Because no one on his side is going to defect from him on that basis. And literally everyone on the ground sees January 6th being overblown as the next 9/11 as a obviously farcical pantomime at best and an active action of persecution at worst. So, like, I don't see why Chad yesing the January 6th thing wouldn't have helped him.
Well, I can understand why, because he probably, like, especially in a debate, trying to win over people who would probably be on the fence. And, even though that we could see January 6th was really not nearly as bad as what the media is trying to make it out to be, there are probably still a lot of people who listen to the media who might be very apprehensive about it.
And honestly, he doesn't even have to go full Chad yes to it necessarily. He could just play up the fact of how much of a non-issue it is for people on the ground, and that I think would be enough. Because that would break the media spell, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because
Honestly,
then it would
should have
make the
been
people at
like,
home ask themselves, wait, why do we care about January 6th again? Oh, because the mainstream media says so, but why did they say so? And that probably would have gone over quite well, I think.
yeah, personally, I think his answer should have been, I'm not happy with this happening on January 6th, but a lot of people in this country have greater concerns right now, like with putting food on the table and the price of rent and the rising crime coming from all the illegal immigration in the country. Like, that would have been my answer on the issue.
Yeah. Like I said, I think he might have benefited from various degrees of more hard line on some of this stuff instead of honestly legitimizing them more than he should have by being conciliatory.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I also get like him wanting to win over, people to his side, especially those who might be undecided. Because as much as Biden collapsed, Kamala Harris has brought in a lot of energy to the campaign, undeservedly, in my opinion, because she's just as awful as Biden, if not worse. At least Biden has the excuse of having a broken brain. What's hers?
I think her brain is broken, but it has nothing to do with what broke his brain. But maybe that was the scheme. Maybe he was trying to look really conciliatory this time so that they would agree to a second debate. Maybe that's the scheme. Because if he comes out in the next one, like leaning into his Trumpness and Chad yesing everything, that will be a massive W, I think.
Well, I think if they do have another debate, Trump really has to hit around the parents issue, because that was going to be a big weak point for the Biden administration. Like, the Biden administration putting, teachers unions, ahead of parents, like putting parents at a DOJ watch list, like that is something that he could really hammer alone. Because here's the thing: look, even people on the left will have, parents who, care about their kids, will put their kids first. So if he makes that a serious issue in the next debate, I feel like it's going to sway a lot of people.
And again, I would lean into Kamala the cop and Kamala the cackler, or do what I do and combine them, Kamala the cackling cop, because a lot of people on the left do not like how hardline she is as a prosecutor. And most people on the right don't even like how hardline she is on the prosecutor, even if they're the tough on crime set. And honestly,
didn't I read a news article that said that she withheld evidence to keep men locked in jail longer than they were supposed to, or even withheld evidence of people who were completely innocent. And I believe she actually got censured by the California State Bar because of this, because it was just so egregious to have innocent people languishing in prison while you have evidence that could free them. And I think that's something that a lot of prosecutors need to do. They basically, like, do their best to pad the numbers, because a lot of people will use basically being a prosecutor as a stepping stone to a political career, and they want their numbers to look good.
Yeah, and not just random offenders, but specifically non-violent people brought in on drug offenses, which again I would lean into, because a large part of the black community, which is a large percentage of the voting base for the Democrats, hate her fucking guts on that point. And the more people you can make aware of that, the better. Honestly, if I were Trump, I would just go back to the 2020 debate she had with Tulsi and clip out the part where Tulsi is destroying her and use it as a campaign ad. That's what I would do. I would get Tulsi's permission before he did it, obviously, but do that because that is the singular best political ad that is hand wrapped to you on a silver platter.
I would also talk about how fake she is because she really is fake. I remember she had this rally when she was talking to union workers, and she changed her accent to a more southern style accent. Which
Yeah,
is why would you do
slang.
that?
Yeah, the
It's really
patois.
really fake. Not only that, but she locked up people for nonviolent drug offenses, and then she went on an interview talking about how she smoked weed in college and was listening to Snoop Dogg in her dorm room, which is one egregious because she locked people up for that, and two an absolute lie because Snoop Dogg didn't even debut as a rapper until after Kamala Harris graduated.
Also, on the topic of marijuana and her being fake, she actually voted no in California in 2012 to the legalization of medical marijuana. In 2012, in California, she did this.
So yeah, I honestly want to get back into making edited videos again. And one of the first ones I think that I would make would be breaking down all my problems with Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party because like I used to be a Democrat, but just the state that they're in now, I can't possibly bring myself to vote for these people. Like I just can't.
Yeah, I am still left leaning. I'm a classical liberal in principle and a social democrat in practice. And there are maybe 4 Democrats in the entire fucking party that I might consider voting for, and several of them are running as third parties because the establishment Democrats hate them. And this is another thing that the establishment of both parties have in common. Both parties, for whatever reason, hate their base so much and will do literally anything they can not to give either of their bases what they want. And it floors me every fucking time I see it.
All right, so let's listen to the video a bit more, and then we get wrap things up.
Yep.
Trump's tactic of being concise, direct, and measured during the Biden debate served him well, not just because Biden actively has dementia and was falling apart like the guy that drinks from the wrong cup at the end of Indiana Jones 3, but also because it pushed back against the perception that he's too pugnacious, that he is in this for his own ego, and that he just wants to be there to insult people that have personally slighted him. And so I do think if there is another debate, which I think is unlikely given it's approaching the election.
I think I've seen that Elon Musk wants to host one, but he would not expect Kamala Harris to show up.
No, I think that 2 things should happen. One, in any future debates, if they happen, it's unlikely that Kamala will agree to them, he should go back to his more reserved, statesmanly, I am the king in waiting, you're mental, you've had 4 years to screw up the country, here's how I'm going to fix it like an adult persona. And as Baron Trump, our future Caesar, of course, has been advising his dad, go on other podcasts and allow the at-length platform where you can't be frustrated by a partisan moderator to show off your agenda and show off how personable you are. The podcast with Theo Von was very good. I wouldn't be shocked now that Trump has been...
Also a
I think that's a very good idea. Trump should do more podcasts because lots of people listen to podcasts, and 2, he doesn't have to deal with the corporate media who actively hate his guts.
Yeah, the podcast point is a good point, but I am gonna push back on the first thing they said a little bit here, because and maybe this is just a difference between how the British approach politics and how Americans approach politics, or should I say Americans approach politics. That would work if Trump was Nigel Farage. But Trump is not Nigel Farage. Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and he's running in America, not Britain. And I think that the important thing that, again, I keep fixating on, that they are apparently directly backwards on, in my opinion, is that they think that Trump can civility and politics and authority his way into office. And I don't think so, specifically because everyone who has a positive word to say about him dislikes that attitude of the establishment and wants him to be the wrecking ball with which to smash the establishment. So
Speaking on that, if they are going to do a next debate, I honestly think it should be a town hall debate where regular citizens can come up and ask questions because Trump is very good at connecting with ordinary citizens. Like when people actually meet Trump and not just the Trump that they see on TV or hear about from, the Democrats or the mainstream media,
it's
they
hard not to
get
like
an
the guy.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kamala Harris she's going to be like when she encounters regular people, at a town hall, she's going to be very, very fake, and people will be able to sense that compared to Trump's, honesty and genuine interest in the people. And so it's going to be a stark contrast.
And I think the difference between this approach of theirs that's obviously informed by being British people and the approach that I'm suggesting, which is very informed by being an American. In Britain, the stiff upper lip, keep calm and carry on, we are gentlemanly and civil over here attitude is the unifying ethos of Britain, and by which I mean proper Britain, not diverse equity and inclusion Britain. But in America, the virtue of rebelliousness, defiance of authority, and irreverence in the face of said authority is our defining ethos. And it always has been.
Yeah. Yeah. If the Brits have, the stiff upper lip, Americans have the kiss my ass.
Yeah. The American expression of shove it up your ass is how we handle things. And not to be that much of a flag waving American here, but you think they would know that given how that their revolution ended. Womp.
Yeah, but I think one thing that Trump like should get Kamala on is I don't know if you recall what a few weeks ago they had a memorial service for the service members who passed away during the absolutely abysmal Afghanistan withdrawal. And Trump went to Arlington cemeteries with the families. They had a wreath-laying ceremony for their you know lost loved ones, and a lot of the families liked Donald Trump because he would listen to them. He would listen to them talk about their lost sons and daughters, and that was very important to them. But then they went online and made videos saying that they felt very much abandoned by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and that they would have liked for them to come to tea, but they just completely ignored them. While Trump, whenever he's asked to for those families, he always shows up.
And the media tried to frame it as Trump being like presumptuous for even showing up, and they forgot to fact check whether he was asked to. That was one of those open mouth insert foot moments of the mainstream media, which again I enjoy mocking both as a irreverence in the face of authority loving American, but also because mocking your enemies when they're being self-evidently self-destructive and stupid is a good time had by all, basically.
So I also believe that the media tried to hit him for taking photos at the at Arlington Cemetery, but I believe the family set out and said that they asked him to take those photos because could expect that on that particular day they would want to get some attention and to remind people about their children's and loved ones' sacrifices, especially in a time where the people who got them killed are running for re-election.
But yeah, if they specifically asked him, and they're perfectly within the rights to specifically ask him, all that does is make the media look even more out of touch and even more pompous. And I even saw a couple people in the mainstream media after it was revealed that they asked going, how dare they ask him to do that? How dare they ask him to show up in the first place? And how dare they ask him to take photos? That's obviously a political bias that they have. And it's like, you can't just decority and civility monger the people on the ground, because the more you try to do that, the more you get the good old-fashioned American irreverence in the face of authority going. So again, guess I shouldn't interrupt my enemies when they're making a mistake, especially when said mistake is funny as shit, but it is a mistake.
Also, there's one more thing that I want to bring up before we head out, and this was ironically brought up by Chris Cuomo. He actually had a point that I agree with. This occurred at the DNC, and he, you know, remarked about how at the DNC, where they're going on about how the wealthy elites are destroying the country with their greed, and how they need to make the billionaires pay their fair share. When they have these box seats at the top of the stadium that are occupied exclusively by the billionaires, who are then looking down on all the pathetic plebeians who could not afford to be
The,
up in the high,
yeah, the
expensive
groundlings.
box.
Literally the word used in Shakespeare's time for that was groundlings. And speaking of Chris Cuomo, have you seen the interview he did with Tucker Carlson on like women and men's issues?
I have not.
He was surprisingly based in that, and I was kind of shocked how much of a gynocentric stooge Tucker was in that instance. I'll send you Dr. Random McCann's video reacting to it, because it really does underscore that whatever you may think of Chris Cuomo, he does have his based moments.
Have you seen? This is completely unrelated, but to wrap up. But have you seen Senator Armstrong from the video game Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance?
I don't think I have. If it's a meme
Uh,
somewhere that I ran across, I didn't realize or
there,
register
there's
that's what it was.
so there are so many memes from this game. In fact, memes are actually one of the topics of the game. But
Base.
uh, yeah, but Senator Armstrong is particularly a character that it's almost like a Trumpian figure. But when you hear his speech, at the end of the game about why he's doing all this, it kind of makes me question: are we sure this guy is the bad guy? Like,
Oh, they did the we'll put our enemies' talking points into the mouth of the villain, and that will somehow poison people against our enemy thing, and it completely
yeah,
backfired again.
yeah. So this was a Metal Gear game made by Hideo Kojima, which he's good at making games, but I don't think he's very good at understanding the mind of the American public. But yeah, I definitely would have. We can I'll grab a video of his speech and send it to you. Maybe we could even examine it on stream, because it's very poignant even to this day. And this was made like over a decade ago.
That is a topic that's definitely worth talking about, because they do that very often. They put the talking points of their enemies in the mouth of someone they want to be a villain, in the hopes that the villainry will rub off on the real life character. But instead, what usually happens is the likable qualities of their enemy that they refuse to acknowledge or aren't even aware of wind up making that villain sympathetic. Like Homelander in The Boys season 3 was a good example. They wanted to tar and feather Trump with the stink of Homelander, but instead they wound up giving Homelander a lot of Trump's more sympathetic qualities, because they refuse to
Yeah,
acknowledge their enemy can have good qualities, and therefore
yeah,
everything their enemy does must be bad.
and also their enemy can have a point, because in that speech when Homelander said like, they control me, they're controlling you too, you just don't know it yet. Like, that is literally an unabashedly true statement in the world of The Boys. Like, that is 100% facts. Like, he
And
wasn't
and on
lying there.
and honestly, while we're on this topic as well, guys, stop putting supremacist talking points in the mouth of superpowered beings, because it literally is less possible to make a supremacist ideology look dumb if the person in question literally is faster, better, and stronger than the average person. Like, the only thing Homelander said wrong in that speech in season 3 was smarter, because he isn't smarter than most people. But in pretty much every other aspect there, faster, stronger, better, I mean, objective reality in that universe does, exist. Therefore, just as a general writing rule, Hollywood, stop putting straw man arguments against supremacy in the mouths of people who actually are superior. It makes you seem daft, and it makes the idea of supremacy look more credible when the people saying it are objectively correct.
Yeah, and here's the thing: they to go out of the way to make Homelander, villainous, but in the show they show that the reason why he is villainous is because he was abused and psychologically manipulated by the very people that in that speech he is attempting to warn people about.
Yeah, he is a classic, almost to the letter, psychologically normal example of cluster B personality disorder. Abused as a child, forced to construct a false self to protect himself from the abuse he suffered. That false self then becoming counterfactual and grandiose because that's the only defense mechanism he has, and because he's stuck in a developmentally primitive form of development. Like, Homelander is a classic narcissist in both the actual sense, but also in the how such things occur in reality, at least according to most psychological models thereof, sense.
Yeah, and here's the thing: we could see in his interactions with his son that he wants to be good for his son, but he has no idea how because again he was psychologically abused, so he has no frame of reference for how to be a good parent.
He was literally a test tube baby raised in a lab with no human connection. And then he was told how awesome and how better than everyone he was, and how important it is to make people like you and to put up a false facade. What the fuck did you think was going to happen if you made somebody like that and then gave them powers relatively equivalent to Superman? Obviously, Homelander is much weaker than Superman because people in The Boys are generally weaker than most other superhero universes, but that's neither here nor there. For the pond that he is in, he is the largest fish, so to speak. Yeah. He's just not in as big a pond as DC or Marvel or even Invincible.
Well, anyway, we've gone way off on a tangent here, so let's wrap things up.
Yeah, we will revisit this on a episode in the future, possibly, because this is a worthwhile. This is a worthwhile topic, I think.
All right, I've been Mystery.
I've been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we have been the Duality of Man. Cheers, guys.
Goodbye, everybody.